So in the last class, I told you about the mean value theorem. Now this mean value theorem will help me to derive a sufficient condition for continuity. Sufficient condition for continuity uh, at a point. Okay, at a point. So this theorem will tell you that if this condition holds, then the function will be continuous at that point. So what is the statement of the theorem? Let me write it down. So let D be a subset of R2. Let D be a subset of R2 and F be a function from D to R of two independent variables. I'll not write all those things. Okay. Okay, let me write down B, because I'm writing a statement, be a function of two independent variables, and suppose I have some point in the domain where I want to check the continuity of the function. So this thing has been given to us. So a sufficient condition that the function f is continuous at the point a comma b. So this function will be continuous at the point a comma b if the following condition holds. What is the following condition? This continuous at the point a comma b is this. What is the sufficient condition? Is this. What is the sufficient condition? One of the partial derivatives exists and bounded in a neighborhood of the point a comma b, and the other exists at the point a comma b. So that means if this holds, then the function will be continuous at the point a comma b. Okay, so this is what I mean by the sufficient condition for continuity. That means if whatever I have written in red, if that holds, then the green one will happen. That means if one of the partial derivative exists and bounded in the neighborhood of AB and the other exists at AB, then the function will be continuous at the point a comma b. So what is the sufficient condition? That means if this thing will happen, the function will be continuous at the point a comma b. So what is the sufficient condition? Two things must hold simultaneously. Number one, see, we have two partial derivatives fx and fy. So I want one of the partial derivative to exist and bounded in some neighborhood of AB. So one of the partial derivative must exist and be bounded in the neighborhood of AB, and other one must exist at the point AB. So fx, suppose I am assuming fx exists and bounded in some neighborhood n of AB, and fy at AB exists. If these two holds, then the function will be continuous at the point a comma b. We'll prove this one. So to prove the sufficient condition of continuity at a point, we will completely require this one, this mean value theorem. What is the mean value theorem? You know, if fx exists throughout a neighborhood of AB and fyab exists. So more or less we have this condition only. One more condition is given, that fx is bounded, one of the partial derivatives is bounded. So that doesn't matter, that will be required at the end, but it is already given, this part is already given to us and this part is already given to us. So if these two things holds, then we can apply the mean value theorem to get this. We can apply the mean value theorem to get this. So mean value theorem will guarantee the existence of some real number theta for which this will hold. So exactly write down the mean value theorem in our preceding theorem. So what is the idea of the proof? See, one of the partial derivatives exist and bounded in a neighborhood of AB. So I'll assume that suppose fx exists and is bounded in the neighborhood of AB, and I'll assume that fy exists at AB, and I'll simply apply the mean value theorem. Let's see what happens. So let us assume that I'm assuming that this partial derivative fx exists and is bounded in some neighborhood n, which is a subset of D, n of a comma b. So this I am assuming that fx exists and is bounded, and I am assuming that fy at AB exists. You could have also assumed that fy exists and is bounded in some neighborhood n of AB, and fx at a comma b exists. This I am assuming without loss of generality. If you are assuming the opposite thing, then the second mean value theorem, the second form of the mean value theorem will be used, which I have already given you the statement. Okay. So what to do next? To apply the mean value theorem, I need some h and k. So I will choose such a points in n. So this is my neighborhood n. Suppose I have some point a comma b. So I will choose such a and k such that a plus h comma b plus k lies inside this neighborhood. Okay, if I choose a bigger h and bigger k, then it will not be in that neighborhood. So I will choose such a h and such a k for which this point also lies in the neighborhood. So that was also required, right? So let us choose h and k such that all these points are inside the neighborhood, that is a plus h comma b plus k and a comma b plus k all lies in the neighborhood of the point. So this point and this point, a comma b plus k, these 2 points also lies in the neighborhood. So let's apply the mean value theorem. So therefore, by the mean value theorem, we get, if this comes in your exams, you have to write the whole mean value theorem here. You just cannot write by the mean value theorem. Okay, so what will the mean value theorem tell us? F of a plus h comma b plus k minus f of a comma b equals to h times fx a plus theta h, right? Yeah, comma b plus k, and plus k times fy at AB plus eta. What is eta? I'll write everything. So where theta is some number lying between 0 and 1, and eta is a function depending upon k only, and which goes to 0 as k goes to 0. So this we have already obtained by the mean value theorem, right? Now you try to understand my point. So according to our assumption, this exists. This exists means this is just a finite number. So this is just a finite number. So this is some finite number. It can be 100, it can be 1000, it can be 0.02. This is just a finite number. Okay. Now as k tends to 0, try to understand my point. if k tends to 0, eta is definitely going to 0, and and this is a finite number, so k into finite number will also go to 0. So as k tends to 0, this quantity will go to 0, just because this, due to our hypothesis, because this exists, so this cannot be infinity or this cannot be undefined anything, so this is just a finite number. So when I have finite number times k, that will go to 0 if k goes to 0, and eta is already going to 0, so this whole quantity will go to 0 as k tends to 0. And look here, because I am assuming that this exists and is bounded, I am assuming this. So because this is a bounded number, it is bounded by some number, suppose m, it is bounded by some number, suppose m, so this is mh, so this will also go to 0 as h tends to 0. That means if h and k goes to 0 comma 0, then this right hand side goes to 0. So why they are going to 0? Because of this reason and this reason. Did you understand why those are very much required in the proof? So let me write the exact thing which I said a minute back. So since fx is bounded in n and eta goes to 0 as k goes to 0, so if I call this a star, so taking limit in star, so I am taking limit both sides as h comma k tends to 0 on both sides, as h comma k goes to 0 comma 0, we get, what will we get? We get limit h comma k goes to 0 comma 0, right, of the left hand side. What is the left hand side? F of a plus h comma b plus k minus f of a comma b. So this thing, this limit is equal to 0, because this thing goes to 0. This also goes to 0, this also goes to 0, as h comma k goes to 0. We are almost done. So or this is independent of h and k, so can be taken outside the limit. That means this f of a plus h comma b plus k minus, so minus limit of this, that means f of a comma b only, equals to 0, or you can just send this to the right hand side, as simple as that. Or this can be written as limit x comma y tends to a comma b, because hold on, f of x comma y, I can write this one because it is same as this. As h comma k goes to 0 0, this goes to a, this goes to b, so I can write here x y, and x goes to a and y goes to b. This is nothing but a comma b. So limit of the function at ab is same as the functional value at ab. So by the definition of continuity, the function is continuous at the point a comma b. So just write the last line, that this implies f is continuous at a comma b. So similarly, what can I write? This implies f is continuous at a comma b. And similarly, we can prove the other part of the, similarly what I can do, suppose I assume that, similarly if fy exists and is bounded in some neighborhood in PHT of a comma b, and fx at a comma b exists, the proof is similar. The proof is immediate, right? So I had assumed that fx exists and is bounded in some neighborhood of a comma b, and fy at ab exists. But if I reverse the roles of x and y, I can similarly prove it by using the second form of the mean value theorem, which I had given in the statement to you. Okay. So this will be very much helpful to us. This gives us sufficient condition for continuity. That means we have got another condition how to check whether the function is continuous or not. So if both the if one of the partial derivative exists and is bounded in some neighborhood of a comma b, and another one at a comma b exists, then we can say that the function will be continuous at the point a comma b. Okay, so we will do a sum based on this, but before that we have one more condition for continuity. This is also called a sufficient condition. Sufficient condition for continuity in a domain. So I did for a point, now for sufficient condition for continuity in a domain. So what is the sufficient condition for a function to be continuous in the whole domain? So the things changes a bit. So let D be an open subset of R2. So this time you cannot take any just D. This is only true for open subsets. So let D be an open subset of R2 and f be a function from D to R. All those things are very obvious, of two independent variables. Okay, so if fx and fy, that's both the partial derivatives, both exist everywhere in D and they are bounded in D, then f is continuous at D, only continuous in. That means I want to check the continuity of the function in the whole domain D. Okay, in the whole domain D, which is an open subset of R2, then what is the condition to be continuous? Both the partial derivative must exist. So this and this both must exist and they must be bounded. Both must be bounded only. I will not be doing the proof of this theorem, okay, because I will not be using this much. So you can just go through the proof. I will give you the proof. The proof is again not that difficult. You simply use the mean value theorem. Okay, so if you are interested to do the proof, I can send you the proof and you can have a look. If you face a problem, you can ask me. Okay. So now let me write down a question. The question is this: let fxy equals to e to the power minus 1 by x square plus y square. So this whole thing is in the power of the exponential when x and y are not 0, because when x and y are 0 this will not be defined, and 0 when x and y are 0. Show that the function is continuous at 0, 0. So you have many ways of doing this. One you can show that the limit at 0, 0 is same as 0. That will imply the continuity of the function just by the definition. But because I am doing an application of sufficient condition, so what I will do, I'll first find both the partial derivatives at 0, 0. Because what was the sufficient condition? One of the partial derivative must exist in some neighborhood of n and must be bounded there, and another one at 0, 0 must exist. So let's see what happens. Let me first find out the partial derivative. So what was the definition of partial derivative? I'll start with this one. So partial derivative at the point 0 0, at the point 0 0. So I want to find this limit h tends to 0, f of a plus h, which is this, f of b, which is 0, minus f of a comma b, 0 comma 0, by h. Did you understand this line? The definition of partial derivative with respect to x at the point a comma b, that means 0 comma 0. So what was the definition? F of a plus h comma b minus f of a comma b by h. So increment in x is there, but increment in b is not there. So b here is 0, a here is also 0. So a plus h to a, b to b, and then h. Understood? What is this? Limit h tends to 0. This is f of h comma 0. F of 0 0 is 0 by h. So let's see what happens. Sorry. Yeah. So this is what? Limit h tends to 0. F of h comma 0. So not both are 0. Let's apply this definition now. E to the power minus 1 by h square plus 0 square, right? So I'll simply write h square by h. So now this is a question of limits of single variable. There is no two variables. So let's see how can we solve this limit of single variable. So this is what? Limit h tends to 0. So this is of the form. I can write this on 1 by h e to the power 1 by h square. Right? This can be written this way. Now what I will do, you see, no, I cannot say directly. What I'll do, I'll use something like this. Let t equals to 1 by h. So I am putting t equals to 1 by h. So this will become 1 by h will become t, and e to the power 1 by h whole square. That means e to the power t square. And as h tends to 0, t tends to infinity. Am I clear with this line or not clear? See, basically you have to evaluate this limits, nothing else. Whatever technique do you have, you can use that, because this is a limit of single variable. I am using this technique. I am putting t equals to 1 by h. Why I am doing this? This is of the form infinity by infinity, right? Because as t tends to infinity, this goes to infinity, this goes to infinity. I can use L'Hospital's rule. So this is nothing but limit differentiate and differentiate. So e to the power t square is e to the power t square. Further derivative of t square is 2t. Now this goes to 0 because whole denominator is tending to infinity. So this is 0. So what can I say? The partial derivative of the function at the point 0 0 is coming as 0, because this definition is for nothing but partial derivative at 0 0. So similarly, you can find out the partial derivative with respect to y at the point 0 0. It will also come 0. You may check. So similarly, fy at 0 0 will be 0. You can just prove it. Now, but only the existence of partial derivatives may not guarantee the continuity of the function at 0 0. We have seen so many examples. So existence of partial derivatives may not guarantee the continuity. So just by calculating the partial derivatives, you cannot say that the function is continuous. So what we saw by the preceding theorems, so for function f to be continuous at 0 0, one of the partial derivatives must exist at the point 0 0. So that is already happening. Both fx and fy exist at the point 0 0. That is alright. But what was the another condition? One of them must be bounded in some neighborhood of 0 0. One of them should be bounded in some neighborhood of 0 0. So let us find out the partial derivative, one of the partial derivative for any x comma y. So let's do that. So my point is this. Now similarly fy at 0 0 will be 0. but only this much is not enough to guarantee the continuity. So now, so at 0 0 we have calculated the partial derivatives. So for x comma y not equals to 0 0, what is the function? The function is this, e to the power minus 1 by x square plus y square. Okay, I will just try to add something here. See here what you do. You have done this kind of questions in single variable. Suppose the function is sin x when x not equals to 0, 0 when x equals to 0. So if I ask you to find the derivative or anything or limit at 0 0, you actually apply the definition of limits. Suppose if I ask you to check or find f dash 0. So for finding f dash 0, so because the function is broken at 0, you cannot just differentiate directly using any formulas. You will apply the definition of differentiation limit h tends to 0, f of 0 plus h minus f of 0 by h. You find using this definition. But if I ask you find f dashed x for any x not equals to 0, you will simply take this. So fx is this when x not equals to 0. We will find out the derivative. What is the derivative? Derivative is cos x, and hence we are done. So only at 0 you will apply the definition to find out the derivative, but at other points you will simply take this function and start differentiating. You do this only. Now see here also, this is my function when I am taking x and y not equal to 0 0. So for any other point I will simply differentiate this. That means I am differentiating partially with respect to x. So treating y constant I will differentiate. So e to the power x is e to the power x further derivative of, so for you can write further partial derivative of minus 1 by this. This is what you mean by partial differentiation. This, and what is this? So minus 1 comes out, and this is 1 by x square plus y square. You think this as your x. So differentiation of 1 by x to the power minus 1 is minus 1 by x square, and further derivative of this thing treating y constant, so 2x. Did you understand the partial differentiation? So now you see here, what is this? It is 2x. Oh, this will be square, no? This will be square because differentiation of 1 by x is minus 1 by x square. So what is the differentiation? 2x by x square plus y square whole square into e to the power minus 1 by x square plus y square. So I have computed the partial derivative with respect to x. So therefore what I have, fy at 0 0 is 0, and I am not finding fy at any other point because one condition is only required is one of the partial derivatives must exist at 0 0. So that is existing, and fx is what? What is the partial derivative? So it is 2x by x square plus y square whole square into e to the power minus 1 by x square plus y square when x and y is not same as 0 0. It is 0 at 0 0, right? We have computed the partial derivative at 0 0. It is coming as 0. Is it bounded? Is this bounded? It is definitely bounded. You see how? Why it is bounded? This quantity is always less than 1, right? When x and y is not 0, so this is always less than 1. You know that e to the power minus something is always minus x, e to the power minus x is always less than 1. So this is always less than 1, and this is also less than 1 because numerator is smaller as compared to the denominator, right? So clearly fx is bounded in some neighborhood of 0 0, and fy at 0 0 exists So the conditions are met. So therefore, f is continuous at 0, 0. Did you get my point? So now we have seen the concept of limits, continuity and partial derivatives in higher order. Now we have the notion of differentiability. So you have also done this in, I hope, in this one, no? Complex analysis. Anyways, I'll do it. So the question is how to define differentiability in Rn in general, right? How to define differentiability in Rn. That means I want to define differentiability over R2, over R3, over R4 and so on. So how to define the concept of differentiability in Rn? That is the first question. But only defining differentiability will not work. I have so many wish list. That means I want few things that I know from a single variable. What I want that differentiability must imply continuity. That is a very trivial result, or one of the most important results that we have seen in single analysis course. So I have to define differentiability in Rn in such a way that differentiability must imply continuity. So if the function of suppose n several variable is differentiable at some vector a, then that must also be continuous at that vector a, or that at that point a. So I have this wish list that only defining differentiability will not work. I want all the results or most of the results that I have done in my single variable course should also hold here. So the first is I want to define differentiability, and secondly I have some wish list. That means with that definition the following things must hold. What is the second wish list? So you have done something called as Lagrange mean value theorem. So I also did mean value theorem, but that was only relating to something called as partial derivatives and not differentiation. So I also want all the mean value theorems, Taylor's theorem must also work with this definition. Okay, so all the theorems that we have done, the mean value theorem, the Taylor's theorem, must also hold with that definition of differentiability. So remember, what is the target? To define differentiability in Rn, but keeping in mind all of these things must hold. If this thing does not hold, then we'll be very much unsatisfied with the definition of differentiability in Rn. So let's see the definition of differentiability in Rn. R. So how was differentiation defined in R? We will evaluate this limit, right? We are evaluating this limit. So f of a plus h minus f of a by h. If this limit exists and is finite, so we call that limit as f dash a, right? And we say that f dash a is the differentiation of the function at the point a. So this was the definition that we used to work with in single variable course. This was the exact definition that we had done. So if this limit exists, then we say that the function is differentiable at the point A, and we used to denote this limit like this. Now f of a plus h minus f of a over h because this limit exists and is equal to f dashed a, so this is nothing but f dashed a plus some function eta, where eta depends on h and goes to 0 as h tends to 0. So because this limit exists at the point at h tends to 0, so this function or this quantity will be this number plus some function of h, but this function of h is such that it tends to 0 as h tends to 0. Okay, did you understand up to here? Okay, now let's see what else can be done. So or I can send that h that side, that means or f of a plus h minus fa equals to h times f dashed x plus eta h, or h eta will write, okay, h eta. Okay, good enough. Now you see what is happening. What is this called as? Do you know what is this called as? This quantity is called as? You should have heard somewhere or seen somewhere this quantity. So this is called as the increment, right? Increment of the function at the point A. So this I will denote by, so this left hand side can be written like this, del f. So this means the increment, sorry, this is A, no? This is A. So this quantity is the increment of the function at the point A. Okay, I will write down what is the meaning of del f. So this quantity is nothing but, so I will give this a new name. I will give this a new name. I will call this as df. So what is df? df stands for h f dashed a. This is known as a differential of f, and this is h times eta. Okay. Now I should write I should write where del f stands for f of a plus h minus fa, which is known as the increment. You may write down the name of this, which is known as the increment, and df is nothing but, it is h f dash e. I'm doing it for a. I should have actually started with x. Doesn't matter. So this h goes here. This is termed as the increment in the function. This is termed as the differential. Okay, so basically what you see here, this is some number times h. This is some number times h. F dash a is a number. So I should have also written something like this. Okay, anyways, so this is h times some number and nothing else, right? This is h times some number, right? So with this quantity we can actually get the differentiation of the function. Dividing by h will give me the differentiation. So we call this function as the, or this thing as the differential. Okay, this is known as the differential, and this differential is nothing but, it is some number a into h. I am calling this quantity as a. So derivative at the point a will be, some number a. I am calling that as capital A. So this is a linear function that depends upon this is a linear function of the form ah and this one. Now you see, or del f equals to df plus big O, you write a big O, I'll tell you the meaning of this, big O of h. I'm writing this as big O of h, and what is the meaning of big O of h? I'll tell you. So hold on. So what is the meaning of this big O? I will tell you. So this is a somewhat definition of big O. When limit x tends to a, fx by gx equals to some finite number or exists, we write fx equals to big O of gx. Okay, this is the definition of, this is read as big O or order. You write this is order or big O. So what I have, limit h tends to 0 eta h by h. Let's see what is this limit. H and h is getting cancelled and eta goes to 0 is h tends to 0. So this limit is 0, it is existing. So we can write as, just apply this one, eta h can be written as big O of h or order of h. Am I clear? So what is now clever answer? How is differentiation defined in terms of single, for a single variable? It is defined like this. So how is the differentiation defined for a single variable? The increment in the function is of the form some number times h plus something order of h, or del f can be written as df plus order of h. So this is the concept of differentiation. So we say that f is different, or fx is differentiable at a if this things holds. If del f is same as df plus some order of h. Right? So now we have a new definition or an equivalent definition of differentiation over in single variable. Am I clear? So now we have this definition. F is differentiable at the point A when the increment of the function at A. So the increment of the function at A is same as the differential of the function, that is some number times F. So my point is, when can I say that the function is differentiable at A? That is, fx is differentiable at A if I can write del f, or I can write this increment, at like this. Some number times h and some order of h, that this contains higher power of h. Okay, so my point is, whenever the increment can be written like this, we say that the derivative of the function at A is this number, right? So this is the concept of differentiation in single variable. So in the next class, I will extend this definition to function of several variables. Okay, so that's all for today. If you have any doubts, you can ask. Thank you.